Yeah, and we're live. Hi,
Yay!
everybody. I'm here with a special guest from Japan, Yoko. Yoko, can you tell the audience about yourself, just your kind of YouTube history, or what has got you into politics, or whatever has brought you here?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for having me here.
Sure.
Um, I started my YouTube channel when I was in university, actually in 2006. But at first, I was only, uploading random videos, so that's why I named myself Random Yoko. But my current channel was launched way later when I got into politics, which was actually in 2012, and then I launched my channel later. But um, what I do is I was originally talking to my Japanese audience. Some Japanese people are interested in politics. So, and then the presidential election of the U.S. came up, like the Donald Trump fever came. So then I wanted to make sure that Japan and the U.S. are closely working together as alliance. So I dived in and did a campaign supporting President Trump. And then I gained some followers or subscribers from the US. And I'm not uploading as many as I should or I want to, but I'm here today working as a journalist and also activist and all kind of things. So yeah.
Do you know how many of your subscribers are American and or Japanese, or have you seen that data on your channel?
Actually, I don't know.
You should. You should take a look at it.
Yeah.
It's really interesting when you open up YouTube analytics. You can see all sorts of stuff, age, demographics, and stuff like that.
True.
I had a look at your channel, just going back to maybe 2013, and you have like a diverse style, because most people like me are just kind of boring and just talk about politics, but you had songs and all sorts of stuff, right?
Oh yeah, different things.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I saw you. I came across you on Nobita. I'm saying that correctly, right?
Yeah, Nobita.
Yeah, his channel. Yeah, he's got a very cool channel as well. I just became interested in Japan. People don't hear enough about Japan in the West. I think it's kind of like a mystery or something.
No, yeah, weird
and
country.
Well, it's just that it's, to me anyway, Japan is a non-Western country, right? Non-European or American country, whatever way you want to put it. But it's how do I say this without sounding like arrogant? It's non-Western.
It's
okay. Yeah. It's non-Western, but it's also not worse. As in developed is one way of putting it. It's like it's not worse, or actually it's probably better in terms of at least technology and sophistication. So it's just, that's a strange thing for maybe the Western. There maybe is an arrogance in the West, you could say, because of hundreds of years of kind of, so this idea of Japan being this very foreign culture that is very sophisticated and we don't know much about it. What kind of differences do you see between Japan and the West? I mean, you're the expert.
Oh, that's a good question. It's funny though, because even though we fought against the US has a strong, I don't know, it's like they were our enemy, but at the same time, that they're like our parents or something, that we are very much influenced by America. And somewhere, somewhere in our head, we believe we are part of them or something like that. That kind of sucks, when you think about patriotism. But I don't know, when we look at white people, for example, we don't, we have yellow skin, but we kind of have lighter tone of skin, and we somehow end up thinking maybe we are white too or something.
Yeah, I was watching some Japanese videos. It might have been Nobita, actually, some of his videos where he's interviewing people on the street. And I was kind of looking at, I mean, not to be crude about racial characteristics and stuff, but I was just looking at some of the Japanese people he was speaking to, and I was like, I mean, there's definitely ethnic difference, right? Racial difference or whatever. But if you were to measure, I was going, these people are white though, in the literal sense of the term. Japanese people are just it's kind of strange, because if you were to look at people from Russia, people from Russia are slightly more Asian than Europeans. And then if you go even more east, they are kind of still European, kind of Russian, but they kind of get a bit more Asian. So it's this strange spectrum that goes across. But anyway, I don't know why we're talking about that, but you mentioned, I know. Oh, by the way, sorry, I'm looking at the screen. I'm looking at you on screen, and the camera's over there. So sorry about that. But you mentioned America, this
Yeah.
kind of maybe like is like Big Daddy, kind of like the parent figure.
Yeah.
You know, if Ireland was conquered by Japan, you know, we would have these crazy ideas about Japan. Like Japan was conquered by America. Are people conscious of that in Japan? Is it just like, oh, I like America? Or do people ever remember, no, we were conquered with guns, with bombs, and maybe that's why we're kind of American? Are people aware of that?
I don't think that people actually associate things that we do learn in school, how horrifying the war was. But it's like, in the post-war regime, the education was turned into like a propaganda, I would say. And so we don't think negatively about the US, but we think that war is bad. That's the brainwashing thing that we learn in school. And so we, like, for example, in summer, atomic bombs were dropped, twice. And then we go to school in the summer vacation. During summer vacation, we go to school, and both days we go there and we watch the bomb footage and so on. And then we don't think about Americans in particular. We just see how horrifying it was and how bad the war was. And it was Japan's fault that we went into war. So it's like the guilt imprint rather than about America. So.
I've heard that there's almost a kind of a feeling maybe that that in Japan that even though the nuclear weapons were dropped on Japan by Americans, in a certain way, it's kind of Japan's fault.
Yeah, that's what we learn in school.
Well, I mean, I have to say, my feeling on it is that if I was the dictator of Ireland and I did a war against Iceland and we took over Iceland and we beat them and then we were colonizing them, I mean, the first thing I would teach them is to say, well, it's not a complicated story. It was your fault. It was your fault. And even so, you did lots of bad stuff, and the bad stuff that we did was your fault. So it's all like it's so
winners write the history.
Yeah, it's so strange that I think people probably in Japan and are aware that winners write the history, but people never question it. Our biggest example of it, and that's not to say that no, it's the opposite. Japan was all good. It's not that. It's just that it's kind of like more complicated. There are maybe two sides. It varies.
This is just teach the history itself, like we think about America as America, for example, but inside of America, there are lots of different kinds of people. And even the World War II, some like conservative people didn't want to start the war against us. And so they were trying hard to, stop those Democrats, but yeah.
Well, I think actually, I know the chat can correct me, or maybe you can. I think they might have been called the America First movement, which is kind of what is said again at the moment with Trump and all of these people. But either way, those anti-war people were themselves called fascist. So you only sympathize with it because you're on their side. So there was no gray area where they would allow people to accept it. But what I'm really interested in is this whole GHQ thing, like post-war thing. And of course, unless I'm missing something, I don't think you have a PhD in it or anything. I'm not asking for an actual essay, but you probably know more than me. What happened in that, like in terms of controlling Japanese society or changing it?
It's the big, really huge picture is like, the leftists in the West wanted to, have the what's the word? I don't know the verb, like communize or like
communize. I think it's communize.
Like wanted to make it into a communist nation. Yeah, there you go. So there were communists that were caught before the World War II, but during the occupation period, those communists were released, and instead the patriotic Japanese, such as the officials, got purged, and they were replaced by leftists or like, communists and socialists and that sort of people instead. And also they changed the education, inking out the patriotism parts, like literally the textbooks were like black, and so that was the base, right? And also, as for media, the GHQ, the occupation people, they ordered the thing called press code, and so the media here had to follow the code, and they couldn't criticize America, China, Russia, even Korea, and so on. And that's the foundation of the modern society too. And as for security, they wrote our constitution, and so in the constitution, there's a part where they say that Japan cannot have our own military and we can't start war and that sort of things. And that's the reason why we only have the self-defense force, and we don't officially have military. And also that's the reason why we can't cooperate with other nations. Like, we want to, but even like trying to revise the constitution, it is almost impossible. So
why is that? Why is it impossible to revise the constitution?
It's the system. Like, at first it has to pass in the Diet, and then like the half of the whole citizens here have to vote, and like it must be agreed on by the majority of the citizens, and it's not going to happen because of the education that's all biased and so on.
So yeah, that makes it sound like it's kind of rigged maybe for 100 years or 100 years since the war, at least. Maybe it's kind of designed to last that long. You make the laws, then you make the propaganda. And I think you hinted at not all nations have one type of people. Of course, I'm not anti-American. It's just maybe the American empire. I'm a little bit. If you haven't guessed already, I'm not. I don't really like it so much. And I just I think Japan is a perfect example because like, for example, I feel like Ireland has been colonized by this kind of global liberalism or globalism or whatever you want to call it. You could call it US kind of empire ideology, because I think it does stem back to the US kind of empire, not Americans, but just the empire. And I think it's happened in Ireland in a kind of a slow, sneaky way over 30 years. But Japan is such a good example because it happened so, it's not vague. It happened with bombs and then invasion and then General Douglas MacArthur. And, and there's actually, they wrote out lists with like the plan. So there's no argument or anything there. How they transformed Japanese society. Again, I am not against necessarily women voting, but that was a key part of it. Now that's a strange thing. You know, why do you, and that was one of many progressive policies. They wanted to liberalize Japan as a, I don't know, I feel like as a market economy, you know, to kind of trade with. But like, what do you make of I'll get to a question. Sorry, I talk too much.
No, it's okay. Yeah.
I do, because I bring you on and then I talk for too much. But the role of women in Japan, what's it like at the moment, maybe compared to the West? You were talking to Nobita about this, so just give us your thoughts on that.
What I think is we are. It's interesting because living as a female here, I don't really want to work. You know, like females here love being mothers, and also we love to cook, and we love all this like conservative things, and it's just our culture, I think. And even though the government is, you know, compromising to the Western societies because that's how they think is we survive, but on the contrary, though, citizens here, females here love just whatever fun things, and I don't know, like we like it when guys treat the meal or drinks and so on, and we like it when men are kind of dominant. Like we want to just follow, you know. So I guess we're just culturally old-fashioned and
Yeah. That might sound strange to some of the Irish listeners here because people think of Japan as kind of oh my god, like, you know, some of these, like, I don't want to be weird, but like, I'm not saying, you know, people think of like all this like kind of uber liberal, like not just liberal, but like from like 200 years in the future, kind of like Hunger Games kind of stuff, with like this fetish stuff and weird kind of things and all that. You know, you do know that's a view in the West of like of these kind of things, and that they're kind of almost hyper futuristic in terms of attitude. But maybe that's just too much people seeing too much anime on the internet or something like that. Is it? Because you're saying Japanese women are traditional and conservative and like to have kids. But the thing I notice is that the fertility rate in Japan is 1.44, and that's actually not quite high. So clearly it's not all Japanese women like to have kids, right? Or else you would have...
I mean, I'm not an expert on this, so I can't say accurately, probably. But I'm 34 right now, and people around me are having babies, and they actually want to have more, but they say that their financial situation is really tight, and that's why they're giving that up. And I'm pretty sure that that's the case for like everybody. Like our economy here has been like in recession for such a long time, and the administration was such a hope for us, but they keep raising our consumption tax, and so like it turns it gets better, and then they raise the tax, so it's like it stops growing again and again, and so we keep losing the opportunity.
Yeah, I think Irish women, there is some feminism and all of that here, but I think it's a kind of a secret that Irish women, especially like you said, in their maybe 30 years old or whatever, would like to have kids, but it's really difficult. It's really hard, and those are the economic conditions. And again, to go back to, you know, America's thing of like kind of giving women rights, as they call it, right? It's not like women weren't human beings in Japan before. Now people can make arguments to me against that, but you know, as in that maybe there was some maltreatment, but effectively, when they gave women the vote, the other part of it was labor participation and all of that. Make women into men, basically. So it's not excel women, it's just make women be just like men. And you get that, and it's like everybody's wondering, why do we need two people working, two wages to have a house? I wonder why that happened. It's because of supply and demand with labor, clearly. I mean, Japan before the war, I think, was a wealthy country. And women didn't need to be working in offices and stuff. So it was possible then, and it changed after that. I don't know. But okay, so while we're on social issues like women in Japan, tell me about hikikomori. Am I saying that correctly? Yeah.
I'm very impressed that you know the word.
I have seen a few documentaries, but
cool.
So
I actually call myself hikikomori because I'm stuck home all the time, and
on the internet.
Because like I don't know, like that's the female side of me, that my place is here and guys work outside, right? But hikikomori is an issue that people stay home without a job and so on, and that happens again because especially I think the people around like 40 to like down to maybe like 30 or so, like my age, people wanted jobs, but we due to the recession we didn't have opportunities, so a lot of them tried to work, and the work environment was awful, and they got fired and so on, and it kept happening, and we got so tired, and I think that a lot of people gained like some bad mental state, and so they can't work anymore, and they stay home, you know, with their parents and so on. Living with their parents is not a problem, but being stuck home is the problem, of course. And and I don't know, that leads to different problems as well.
Yeah, it's not just Japan. It's everywhere. In the West, there's a kind of a slang term for it called NEET. It's NEET, which means like I'm not sure. It's like not in employment.
Yeah.
No
oh,
employment,
yeah.
no training, no. Basically, like like a hikikomori.
Yeah, we
And
actually have the word nito.
oh, you do as well.
Yeah.
Wow. You have a big vocabulary for these guys, but there's, like you mentioned, they get fired and stuff. There is only so much failure a person can take, I think, when they're young, and only so many pushes back before people start to just drop out and leave society. And the other thing is, there's only so people need a certain amount of hope. People need to think. I feel like when you're 20. Of course, when you're 20, it's going to be possible to get a house and possible to have children, but it needs to be more than just possible. It needs to be like, you should be able to look at it and say, I don't need to be like a Superman or Superwoman to do it. I think if I just do steady work, whatever, then I can do it. And I think some of the people on the lower end of society, and by that I mean in terms of talent, confidence, and all of that, will look at that kind of situation and just instinctually think, I don't think I can do this, and drop out. It's really sad. I saw one documentary on RT or Russia Today, and it's just really sad. I mean, if these guys just had the confidence even to just say, hey, I'm a hikikomori, and whatever, I'm leaving the house, I'm going for a walk, and that's what I am, and just, but I think it's shame as well. They can't get over it, and that's actually worst.
People get in the habit of the same thought pattern and so on.
I think it's kind of like hiding. People hide, people shouldn't really do that. So for any Japanese hikikomori listening, liberate yourself or whatever. I wanted to ask you about some of your early videos. Your songs were, and some were in Japanese now, and I couldn't understand them. Were kind of, there was some beef with South Korea politically, or what's Japan's relationship like, at least from your perspective, with some other Asian countries, starting with, let's say, South Korea?
With Korea, it's difficult because politically very bad, but socially very good. That like people loves Korea, but as for politics, the country keeps like blaming us and try to get reparations again and again and again, even though our deals say that it's the end, this is the last time we give money, but they keep digging things up, making other issues, and keep blaming. And so, but the thing is that those people that do that sort of things are often like pro North Korean people inside of South Korea too. And what's interesting is that today there are conservative people inside of South Korea that are rethinking about the relationship with Japan. And back in the day, of course, they didn't like the idea of being conquered by Japan. And so for them, it's like, oh, we got independent from Japan, and that's like celebration, but and so we were the bad guy. Japan was the bad guy to South Korea. But today they're saying that it's important to build relationship with Japan so that they can, fight against North Korea and China and so on. So I think the time is healing things.
You said there's pro North Korea people in South Korea. I'm from Ireland, far away. I have no idea. I didn't know that. Is there, can you explain that in any way? Is it random people just like North Korea, or is it a certain type of people, maybe on the left or the right, or poor or rich, or is there a certain type of people who are pro North Korean in South Korea?
So in South Korea, pro North Korean people means leftists. And so like conservative people love South Korea, right? They want South Korea to be South Korea. But leftists inside of South Korea, they want the country to unify with North Korea. So, and the symbol of that is the president right now named Moon Jae-in, and he is acting like a dog of North Korea. So South Korean people are angry, not everybody, because they're brainwashed by the media like elsewhere. But there are young conservative people today inside of South Korea that are fighting against North Korea and so on.
That's interesting. You say the media, like you just say it like it's an assumption that we both understand. You know the way the media, right? And I could say people in the West could say, well, you know the way the media is here, and people have all sorts of different reasons. Oh, it's this reason, it's that reason. The media is kind of like this. But then you go to South Korea and you're like, oh, you know the media, right there, and even without describing it, I understand what you're talking about. They're kind of maybe kind of anti-nation, anti-proud of your nation. They're against gender distinctions, maybe a little bit. They're kind of leftist in a certain way, especially on social issues. Pro this, you know all that stuff. Everybody watching knows as well. It's so strange that it's like that in Korea. It's like that in Japan. It's like that in Ireland and America. I assume maybe India as well. Maybe they have a pro-Hindu press. I don't know, but it's so strange that why is it that media always goes that way? It's maybe a story for a different day, but you know there must be something about the psychology of people who want to control narrative and control things and kind of have that voice that makes it those kind of, because if you go to a factory where people make like stuff, they're probably going to be right wing or conservative or religious or traditional. It's just something about the media attracts the worst people ever, you know. It is the same in Japan. What actually, yeah, that's a good question, because what is Japanese media like? How do you find it right now? And what's your relationship with them as well? Because you're a public figure.
In Japan, our media is very much left biased, and that happens because of our post-war regime. We're still in, like, even though the World War II was like 7 decades ago or even longer, a long time ago, but the regime has been the same. The system has been the same. We couldn't say no like Germany did. Germany blamed everything bad on Hitler and moved on. Like they rewrote their constitution and everything. We didn't. So our media, media, education, all the system is still the same. The policies are the same, pretty much the same as the occupation period. So that means that if you study hard and become successful in Japan, you graduate from university as such a leftist person and hating your own country. And so if you then get a job at media, then you're gonna keep writing all the bad things about your own country, thinking that it's a good thing, like justice. So that just the roots are coming from the system, I would say.
I kind of agree, actually. I've had a theory on this recently and I had just forgotten it there. And it's just what you said, or kind of, is that, well, at least I believe that people who are in, I don't know if you have NGOs in Japan, by the way, and they're kind of like these groups NGO? Like Amnesty International. Yeah, you have those, yeah?
Yeah.
They're kind of like, almost like media, and they're always campaigning for leftist stuff. They're kind of like civil society groups, human rights and all this kind of stuff. But I think maybe it's less to do with the psychology of the people themselves and more to do with who gives them power. Because if the power elite in Japan wanted the media to be like you, they would just give you a really good job with the Tokyo Telegraph or whatever, or whatever your big newspaper is, or you would be on the news at 6 o'clock every day. Like, but they don't. They give it to other people. So I think maybe that's largely one of the reasons why. Now, what about China? How does Japan get on with China?
Oh, we have such a bad relationship. It's even on a social level. I mean, culturally we like China, but our politicians invite lots of tourists, and like normal citizens are tired of lots of tourists from China. And even though like tourism companies love it, but now they're getting the boomerang, you know, with the coronavirus. But anyway, China has been invading into our territory like every day, literally every day. So we have like a territorial disputes and also historical disputes and all kinds of disputes, and they always talk negatively. Like they criticize us all the time, making us the bad guy, and we're just fed up with everything. And especially conservative people in Japan are always fighting against China, and that is something that we agree with Trump administration in the US. So our relationship with the US are good because enemy is enemy, right? So
That sounds like an immediate. I can see often kind of in the future just this problem for me. For my amateur understanding of Japan is that you know, if you're from the perspective, and maybe you are, I am anyway, from the outside, is that a country like Japan and any nation has to liberate itself from this kind of enforced guilt through kind of like narratives that are half fake. You know, they're kind of half fake and censored and everything, and it's just this daily guilt and things that are just anti-nation, anti-life, anti-forward positivity and future. I don't know. I feel like it's a culture of death in a way. You know, this kind of self-hatred. I think just like with hikikomori, the way you need to not be ashamed, and you need even if you don't work and you're whatever, you should just say, "I'm proud to go out the door and say I am what I am and I love who I am." It needs to be like that too for Japan and any other country to really have any future, or else you're just going to be sitting there every day at like waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you know, equivalent. But my point anyway is that, you know, you have China to your west, kind of, or southwest.
West,
and that's a global superpower now, and it's a issue for you if you have issues with them. But then at the same time, it was America are the ones who kind of colonized Japan and beat it in the war. And that's always going to be the case. In a way, you're kind of stuck. The idea that you would just go independent and say, let's just remove this American empire influence and military bases and all of this stuff. Then you have China. It's kind of a squeeze. By the way, military bases, Okinawa, there was some issues recently, I heard, with soldiers based in Okinawa. What happened there? Or did something happen there? I heard about sexual assault. I'll have to look it up. So I'm a bad journalist here, where I've mentioned a story that I don't know about. But someone, I'll tell you what, somebody told me about it in a bar last week.
Okay, so that actually happens a lot. I'm not saying that crimes happen often, but the media there take up anything from the U.S. military. And they campaign that the U.S. military is bad, and they need to leave our country. So it's the leftists in Okinawa that are, doing that kind of reporting, because the governor of Okinawa even is such a leftist, and they are not. The governor is not cooperating with the government and so on. So
that's, to me, that's it's, again, it's maybe not. It's just my opinion. Like in Ireland, we have an airport in the west that was being used by U.S. military during the Iraq War, because they would have to fly across the Atlantic and refuel and then go off to Iraq. And they were using this airport, but Ireland is, in our constitution is meant to be a neutral military power. So even in World War II, we didn't side with Hitler or Britain. We just stayed independent. And now we broke that to let them land and use it for, even if it's just refueling, it's still, we're taking a side. We don't let Saddam Hussein refuel his planes or whatever, right? And it was leftists who protested that. And I had wished maybe that there was a right wing and a conservative side that said, hey, but it seems like there's always this marriage between kind of like two different forms of right wing, in my opinion. There's the kind of pro-military, let's go to war, kind of stuff, and then there's the conservative people who go along with it. I'm just interested because I genuinely thought it would be the right wingers in Japan were against the military more, but you're saying it's leftist.
Right now, it's the leftists that it's like they don't want wars, and so how they think is that they believe in the history that the winners wrote in the World War II, meaning that Japan was the bad guy. So if we go into war, then we're going to start slaughtering people and so on. So they don't want us to have the military. They don't want the US to be here. Like, they just reject all military stuff because they are afraid that things will go out of control and so on.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking of someone like Yukio Mishima or someone like that. I imagine he would have been anti-American empire,
Oh,
anti-American empire anyway, military. I guess so. He was against the. I mean, he died like
he's suicide.
yeah, and taking over a Japanese military base. But if you took over a Japanese military base in the 70s, pretty much an American military base by extension. You know, it's like it's dominated by that. His story is very interesting, and I find it curious as well that he is a very. I mean, he was basically kind of pro Japanese regime, the regime before the war. And you know, he was very popular. He was a very popular author.
He
one of
actually
the world's
still
most
is
famous.
popular.
But that's weird to me because I thought Japan was subjugated against that mentality by rule of kind of law almost. But yet he's very popular. Do people are two people thinking about two different things at once, or do they understand? Because it's a contradiction. What's that like? I mean,
I think what Mishima wanted to do is to have Japan as Japan. That they like he was way ahead time back in the day. That he wanted to have our own constitution and have our own military and so on. And that's actually what we conservatives are saying today in Japan. So it's difficult because I think the thing what you're wondering about is why conservative people love America and why the alliance is cool. Is all right.
Yeah.
And that happens is because we are being realistic. Eventually we want to get completely independent, like it's an independent nation, but we're not, like system-wise we're not independent. So we want to completely get independent one day, have our own military, have our own constitution and so on. But right now it's just impossible. And right now what we can do with the limited options is to team up with the US and so on. Yeah, if that answers.
That makes sense. There was I'll just tell you a little boring story here. There was in around the 1910s and 20s, so like basically like 100 years ago in Ireland, we had a revolution from Britain and became independent from them.
Yeah.
And when we became independent, we had the first treaty was signed, but it didn't give us full independence. And the other side, where it started a civil war in Ireland, where half of the people were saying, look, we have like 75% of it. And the other guys were going, no, we need full independence. And the guys who got 75% or 50% were saying, it gives us freedom to achieve freedom, you know. And that's kind of like what you're saying with America. To stick with them maybe brings you forward so that you can then take the next step and get out and by yourselves. I don't want to keep you for too long. I know it's late over there, but so kind of like my second last question is so to stay with the themes we're talking about, do you think Japan's culture has been kind of cut off from, do you think like Japan is a kind of what's the word? Like if you have like a spirit and you're cut off from it, it leaves you kind of half dead. Do you think Japan is cut off from its culture, and does it have an effect on you?
Oh, the post-war regime kept me half dead until 2012.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
Because I didn't know anything about politics or history until 2012 for some reason, and until then I hated Japan. I had believed that Japan is such an evil country, or really left behind the Western nations and so on, and our culture can be like a kinky and like sexual and weird, and I was ashamed of that. But then I realized now that was due to the guilt imprint in education, and that it's because of the ignorance of my own country that has deep, really ripe culture. I just didn't know, so I didn't have confidence and so on. And I also hated myself because I always compared myself with Westerners and saw the difference, and I somehow thought that Japan was bad. So Japan was bad equals to Japanese sucks. So I always felt like I'm not good enough and so on. And I was very much depressed. And that's how I became a hikikomori and so on. And after I learned all the history and what's going on in my country today, I started to see things, and then I started to love myself as being Japanese and all the history here, and I want to do something for my country, and that's the state that I'm in now.
That was a really good answer. A big question that's happening right now in the West, I'm sure you've seen it, and a lot of my audience are interested in this stuff, is about, in the West, we have this immigration thing. Immigration is like crazy levels, always, every year, just more and more and more and more. And people think that not only our culture, but our people essentially will be gone, right? Is there any similar thing happening in Japan? Because some people, basically, the thing is that all these right-wingers, nationalists, conservatives, whatever, that kind of side of things, and including me, will often use Japan as the example, because our economists will say, oh, well, we need all these people because otherwise all of these excuses, right? Or we need them for everything. And a lot of people will point out Japan and say, well, Japan's a highly sophisticated, advanced economy, and they don't do that. But then some people will come back and say, actually, Japan is to have a lot of immigration and everything. You are the expert here. You're sitting in Japan right now. What's going on with immigration in Japan right now? Is there any?
Yeah, there are more and more immigrants, actually. I think it's due to the government wanting workers from overseas to fill in the blank, of the economy being bad. So,
it's like those 1.44. Your birth rate is below replacement.
Yes.
So, I mean, ultimately, if it's that kind of has to be filled in somehow.
Yes.
So that's what I was thinking, is that Japan has a good culture. It's, I won't say insular, but it's like, it's not like crazy pro-immigration like maybe we are. But at the end of the day, that gap needs to be filled, and you have two choices. You either start having babies or you you take in whoever. And what about rhetoric at the moment? So it is happening, maybe not so much, I'm guessing, as much as is happening here, but what is the rhetoric like? Are people pro-immigration, anti-immigration? Are people just oblivious? Or what's the mood like? And is there a lot of push from media and the government to say, oh, it's good, it's good? Is there any conversation about it?
Right now, we don't talk about it because it's not as much in danger. But sometimes politicians bring that up like a bill, to pass. But then, especially conservatives opposed to that idea, like no workers, because what we're afraid of is that the foreigners will come and they will take over our insurance system and so on. Like, we have insurance system, and we are paying, but we're afraid the foreigners will take that away or something like that. And lots of conservatives are opposing it in many reasons. Yeah, and right now it's just like we have different topics, so we're not talking about it, but it's definitely something that we are rejecting. And even I think non-political people also, I think they love Japan being Japan, and foreigners are guests. That's the fundamental thing or the feeling that we have. So I don't think that people want to change that.
Absolutely. And if I go to Japan as a foreigner on a holiday or for a few months or something like that, I mean, I want it to be Japan. I do. I really do. And it's really sad. No, it is. It's sad that places go away, because you will have that now. If you go to Paris, it doesn't really feel so much like, I mean, you can see the Eiffel Tower. Yeah, it's a building, but like, is it really French? Maybe. So I don't want that to happen to Japan, and it's good that it's a bit better. I had a question for you and it's gone. No. It was to do with immigration. Oh yeah, that's what it was. Just a novelty question for the last one, because it's kind of the news everybody is entertaining themselves with. Coronavirus, COVID-19. What's happening in Japan? Is it good? Are you dealing with it well or badly?
We were panicking. But now it's been a while now, so we are used to it. And I think that well, I don't know what to talk about, but the government requested all schools to close, and 98% listened. So kids are staying home, and workers, they are doing the so-called telework, the distant work, and so they don't go commute and so on. So not everybody, but there are reduction of our connections. So we're having things in control, and also we're stopping foreigners from coming from like certain countries and so on. But the problem is that the government started to do that way later than they should have. And my guess is that they couldn't because our government, or I mean, our country was going to invite Xi Jinping from China as a state guest in April. So like the virus coming from China, and and we were gonna invite the leader from there as state guest. So we didn't want to do anything to insult them. At least that's what the government thought, because inside of government there are lots of pro-China people and they are influential, and so our actions were delayed, and now finally taking action, so we're good, but the number is remaining low. There are rumors that it's because the government doesn't want us to be tested so that we can keep the number low, so that we can have the Olympics in 2020. I mean, in this year in Tokyo summer. But I don't know how it is, but it's definitely not as bad as Italy, for example. There, the number are skyrocketing there. But culturally, though, we don't hug or do the kisses and so on. Like we just bow, so we don't touch each other. So that might be one of the reasons why.
Yeah, very different. So you have the bow thing, and
we're very clean too, very hygienic.
Yeah. Italians are not, No, I'm only joking. For the Italians, I actually had an Italian doctor on yesterday, so if he sees this, he'll be very insulted. Italians are very clean as well, just not as clean as Japanese people. They also, they're very tactile, all constantly kissing each other and stuff, and hands and everything. Yeah, so. And some other stuff. People say as well it was a connection to Wuhan. All of this crazy stuff. Anyway, I think that's about it. I think we've had a very cool conversation. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, I enjoyed too.
Yeah, nice one. So if you're ever in Ireland, let me know, and we'll get a bunch of people to welcome you in.
Yeah, it would be cool.
Yeah, nice
You're
one.
like the first person from Ireland that I talked to. I mean, I have met 2 people from Ireland at CPAC, like the American event, but I didn't really get to talk to them. So you're like the first one. So that's really cool.
Nice one. I'm honored. Okay. Thanks for joining me. So for everybody at home, subscribe to my channel, obviously, and share this, and Yoko's channel as well. It's not in the description right now. I just didn't get around to it. I'll put them both in the next 20 minutes or whatever. So subscribe to Yoko. It's a really cool channel. It's really good to see some kind of content that you don't ordinarily see. Subscribe to something a little bit different. So thank you for joining me, Yoko. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.